You're in the right place at the right time, stretching from the distant spaceports of Black Spire and Mos Eisley all the way to the jewel of the core at Coruscant and the bright center of the galaxy, slamming into your hollow projector like a supercharged nanoparticle of coaxium. This is the Star Wars Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, John. My co-host is
Jason.
And we are here to bring you your needed dose of Star Wars film, TV, book, comic, gaming, and collecting news. The date is October 19th, 2020, and we are only a little over a week to go until Season 2 of The Mandalorian, which I'm pretty excited about. I'm kind of low-key on it, actually, because I haven't been pumping myself up with constant trailers or anything like that. I'm kind of just ready to just jump in blind, basically. How about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I still need to rewatch season 1.
Same. Yeah, and like I said on the last episode, I'm sure we'll do like a little mini breakdown of season 1 and our thoughts on it, and individual episodes and all that. And speaking of The Mandalorian, season 3 is confirmed as happening. I guess it just got announced a couple days ago, and they begin filming later this year. And since there's only a couple months left in the year, I'm assuming that goes into early 2021, and it'll be interesting to see, how if they have to change anything for COVID. Obviously, they will. But I think season 2 was in the can when COVID like first really hit, so they got lucky.
Well, I know a lot of stuff has been pushed back, but I think, at least as far as like movies and stuff, but I think a lot of that has to do with theaters and just like how many people they can get out into the theaters.
Yeah.
So, and I think people are starting to figure out like how to work around COVID and maintaining safe work environments and stuff. That includes like film productions and stuff, show productions.
Yeah, and I think The Mandalorian, compared to other series and things, has a relatively small crew. I don't think it's a gigantic production with tons of extras and things like that. And with the advent of the what do they call that, the special effects thing where they do the surround kind of blue screen? There's I think it's called. It's not called the Surface because that's the app. There's a name like that though.
Is there just blue screen? Is there a fancy term now?
It is, but this particular setup they have where it surrounds in like 180 degrees on the set.
Oh,
and the ceiling.
I don't know what it's called, but I've seen like production photos.
Yeah,
I didn't know that it had a special name for it.
There's a name for it. I want to say it's the Surface. But anyway, I'm gonna look like an idiot because then there's gonna be anyone who listens to this is gonna be like, it's this. But yeah, I think that's what it is, and I think that was one of their Emmys that they got was for the special effects in season 1. So I think with the advent of that technology, it is easier to shoot things on a small set and not have a big giant production with, tons of people and all that. So that's cool. And yeah, so season 3 is happening. I'm really happy because I'm not surprised. The Mandalorian has been a big hit, not just for Disney Plus, but I think Star Wars in general. I think we saw that there was so many fans that were like, fuck The Rise of Skywalker, that was a piece of shit, but I love The Mandalorian.
Right.
I think that was the common reaction from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Although, and I've said this to you outside of episodes, I kind of agree with that. Yeah, me and you were not the biggest Rise of Skywalker fans, but I think we're also realistic in how we approach The Mandalorian. Do I think it was the greatest Star Wars thing ever? No.
Well, I'm not, I like the Mandalorian and stuff. I've never really been into Boba Fett and Mandalorian lore in general.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
never really interested me that much.
yeah,
So, but I like good Star Wars stuff. I like good Star Wars stories, and
sure.
this is good.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, it's an episode by episode feeling because there was some episodes I really loved, and then there was a couple where it was just kind of okay, and I'm just like, whatever. Um,
Well,
like
there's always filler episodes.
there's always filler on anything, and I just don't think it was this grand, amazing, mind blowing thing that came along and blew my mind like other people seem to be feeling. Um, I still think Solo and Rogue One are more exciting to me personally than The Mandalorian, but it's still a great show. I still love it. It's Star Wars, and like we always say, 2 hour movie of Ben Kenobi mowing a lawn would make us happy.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to that in the Kenobi series.
Yeah, Kenobi,
But
episode one.
those movies deal with grander stories too. Like there's
Yeah,
bigger things going on. Whereas in The Mandalorian, you're not entirely sure really. I mean, the implications are huge. Like uh, another Yoda, another Yoda species
yeah,
running
yeah,
around. Is it a clone? You know, of
yeah, yeah.
I think it would. Speaking of clones and Yoda, I think it'd be funny if it ended up being like a clone of Yaddle and not Yoda, because everybody's
Yeah,
like, oh, it's baby Yoda. Maybe it's a clone of Yoda, but it's
right,
actually
right.
Yaddle.
Right. I keep saying it's their child, you know. Yoda had a little action on the side with Yaddle, and there you go.
Yaddle, yeah, yeah,
So who knows? It is I still it's funny, I still even though everyone calls him Baby Yoda, I still try to refer to him as the child. But
yeah.
like
Good luck.
when you're talking to someone on the street, or just in a comment on YouTube,
Yeah,
that's not always gonna happen.
right.
Um but yeah, there is big implications potentially with that, and but obviously the show is framing everything on a very intimate and personal kind of story level, where it's not these huge, grand, galactic, battles and things. It's very whenever there's a battle, it's just like a street fight or a
Yeah,
shootout, like in an
yeah,
alleyway or something. So
yes.
that's kind of cool. I mean, yeah, we saw some speeder bikes and some, the all the little tiny battles, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
everything's been kind of small.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, season 3 is coming. I'm excited that they can probably craft the story that I'm sure Filoni and Favreau wanted to tell. I'm sure they had a broad arc that they wanted to tell with
I
this.
hope so.
I'm
Nobody else
I
has it over
no
there
one else,
for the last few years.
yeah, but we know them, and we know that they like to have everything be. I
Yeah,
mean, because Filoni had an arc. He always had an intended end for the Clone Wars, how it leads
right.
into Revenge of the Sith, and he talked for years before season 7 was a reality. Of he was disappointed personally that he never got to show that intended end.
Right,
So
right.
it was cool that he got to finally do it. So yeah, I trust them, and I guess it remains to be seen how many seasons we'll get all together. I hope it doesn't end up like The Walking Dead, which is on like season 10 or 11 or
Yeah,
12
it's
now.
somewhere in between A&E pumping out tens of seasons or Netflix, which Netflix always likes to end shows super early. It
Super
seems
early.
like a little
Yeah,
too early depending on the show. But
yeah,
I don't know. Disney's going to probably milk it for all it's worth. But
they
I mean,
probably will.
if there's an intended end,
Yeah,
there's other stories to tell in the Star Wars universe. So
absolutely.
they don't need to milk this particular story too
No.
much.
And I'm sure we'll, just like with other Star Wars things, with it being all canon in this new era, we'll see connections probably with the Cassian series on a small level, I'm sure, or
Yeah.
even Kenobi. There's always little story nuggets that they can connect things. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see what happens. Um, in book news, we have coming out in, I believe, November. From a certain point of view, The Empire Strikes Back. 40 years of The Empire Strikes Back. And this is coming out from Del Rey, and it's very similar to the one that came out 3 years ago for A New Hope, which was also called A Certain Point of View, 40 Years of Star Wars. I'm very excited about this because these are almost like tales of books, like,
Mm-hmm.
back in the day where you get to see little side stories about everything that happens during the events of the movie. I read the Star Wars one 2 years ago, and I know I told you about it a little bit, some of the stories, and it was really good. And you get a huge roster of authors. So you had people that were established, like um, I think I'm trying to remember who was in the A New Hope one. I almost wanted to say Timothy Zahn had one, but now I can't remember. But you had a few authors that went back a ways, and then you also had new authors from the Disney era, like Claudia Gray. And yeah, the Star Wars one was really good. Um, got to see more Cantina stuff, things on the Death Star. There was a few silly stories here and there, but that's expected. Um,
Will
but this,
Wheaton wrote a story in that?
yeah, he did. He actually
I'm
did,
looking at the
and
list right now.
it was really good.
Yeah.
He, I think he wrote something about a rebel whose home planet was Alderaan, and he was all ready to. I think his girlfriend or wife or kid was on the planet or something. It was something where someone didn't know that Alderaan had blown up, and they were gonna like go back to it, and it's just really bittersweet because we all know the truth.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was interesting that he wrote for Star Wars of all things.
I'll have
Um,
to read it. This one flew under the radar for me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I always did
these are
like the
good.
anthology books.
Yeah, these kinds of ideas are good, and it's cool because now we know we'll definitely get a Return of the Jedi one in 2023 for its 40th anniversary. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's also been some interesting recanonizations from the Star Wars one. The Night Cantina bartender is Akmena, who was from the holiday special, played by B. Arthur. So she's been recanonized from.
That's really important.
It is right. Just imagine. I mean, there was that whole cantina sequence where she's singing with all the
Yeah.
creatures, and
Yeah,
oh my
of
god,
all the recanonizations, that's one of the ones I was really, really worried about.
yeah, Akmena. And speaking of the holiday special, speaking of the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special is coming to Disney Plus on November 17th. And according to the press release, this picks up post episode 9 and finds Rey continuing her Jedi training. She comes upon something mystical in a Jedi temple that sends her hurtling through time, meeting Star Wars legends and visiting places of the past.
What okay.
Yeah.
there's, there's the rumors, of them like wiping away the canon or the sequel trilogy
I was
using
I
the
was gonna go
pathways
I was gonna go into this.
the
This is
pathways of the force. What if this is it? They put it in the
hey,
holiday special.
you never know. And the thing is, people people wonder, like, Disney says everything is canon. Does that include Lego? There's nothing to disprove that Lego isn't canon, but okay, obviously it's not. Obviously, we know that as adults, it's not a Lego special is not canon.
Right.
However, the way some people have looked at this, like Alex from Star Wars Explained and other people even, the Lego events like whenever you see the Lego video games or the Lego Star Wars TV specials, like there's like Yoda Chronicles, and there was the Freemaker Adventures, and there was other ones. You see the movie events, but obviously they never happen because, like the movie, because they're silly and they're funny and they make fun of things. So look at the Lego things as kind of the same thing. It actually happened, but this is the Lego version of how it happened.
Yeah.
So maybe Rey really does go to this Jedi temple and goes hurtling through time. Maybe.
Oh, it's been done before.
Yeah, Ezra.
Yeah.
With the world between worlds, and
what if it's
but
his fault?
it's all
What if
Ezra's
the
fault.
the sequel trilogy is his fault? If he hadn't mucked with the time travel.
Well, now you have a target for your hatred.
Yeah.
Just disregard Ryan
Beyond the
Johnson.
blue, but beyond the hair and stuff.
Yeah, actually,
Gonna be that.
maybe it was Ryan Johnson who he's wearing an Ezra mask in that scene. It's just him. So you never know. But yeah, time travel in Star Wars is an interesting thing that's extremely rare. It has happened in an old Ewoks and Droids comic book from the 80s, which is really on the hinterlands of canonicity, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But it was something like where, and I haven't read it, even though I own those old Droids and Ewoks comics. I haven't read it, but from what I understand from summaries, was that C3PO and R2D2 get sent back in time through some portal on Endor or something, and then they end up influencing the Ewoks' culture so that when the Ewoks see them in Return of the Jedi as the Golden God, it's because C3PO went back in time. And
Yeah.
I kind of like that
Well, it
idea,
explains it.
actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny and ridiculous, but it also connects to there being strange portals and disturbances in the force around Endor, which is actually part of the continuity over the years. After all, I mean, where did the debris go? You know,
Yeah.
some of it got sucked to that one, the planet from Rise of Skywalker, that moon where they had the kind of ocean and the
Yeah.
plains and everything.
Yeah.
The glove of Darth Vader was sent to Mon Calamari at the bottom of the ocean. So this ties into the glove of Darth Vader as well.
Yeah.
Um,
That's something I need recanonized.
yeah. You know, this is the kinds of topics we deal with on this show, is the boonies of canon. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this holiday special. Actually, it seems like it's written to be. I mean, all the Lego specials have been really good. They've been really funny. Some of the funniest Star Wars comedy I've seen is in the recent ones that
Well,
Disney has done.
almost any of the Lego versions of things, because they deal with
Yeah,
other franchises and stuff. It's really good at like poking
yeah,
fun. So I think this should be pretty good.
yeah. And
Hopefully.
if it has Lumpy with his mouth of bees, in Lego form, then
I don't know if anybody notices that. Maybe they do. His whining.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone who doesn't know, close your eyes and watch the original holiday special. Whenever Lumpy comes on, close your eyes and just imagine what that sound is. To me, it sounds like a jar of angry bees. So that's just my observation. But yeah, this special actually has the voice cast of a lot of returning Star Wars stars. You got Kelly Marie Tran coming back as Rose. I'm sure tons of fanboys are absolutely ecstatic at that news.
Maybe she'll get some sort of.
Closure.
I don't even know if there was anything opened for her story arc, but
Let's go off on a tangent here just for a moment because this is something I want to cover. It's been bugging me ever since The Rise of Skywalker. Why is it that people relatively disliked Rose's character in The Last Jedi? Relatively. But then as soon as The Rise of Skywalker came out, and there was many things to criticize it with, how come the fans were all like, what about Rose? How how come she didn't have closure? How come where was the end of her arc? Excuse me, no one wanted to see Rose. That I thought. I mean, I didn't have a problem with her, but I thought that was kind of a Jar Jar situation where everyone hated Jar Jar in the first movie, so George cut him back in the next two. Did you hear anybody going, "What? Where's Jar Jar's arc?" Well, actually, there was some, but I think we were mostly happy at the lack of Jar Jar. I look. I think Rose got just the right. Look, okay, think of all the things Rise of Skywalker was cramming. You have to end the saga of 9 parts. You have to end the trilogy. You have to be your own movie. So you have to wrap up all these loose ends. Do you think they're gonna bother with like 10 minutes or 5 minutes extra of Rose?
Well, I mean, they sort of set up a sort of a love thing between her and Finn. So I think people were looking for at least some sort of something with that
Kiss.
closure.
Okay, in
I,
that regard, I see it. I maybe they could have used one brief intimate moment
I
or
mean,
something.
if you're gonna make her so important in the Last Jedi, she should have some sort of closure to questions about how she obviously likes Finn. Does Finn like her? Like
True.
they didn't
True.
really deal with it at all. Even so far as like you know a little line about I was we're
Yeah.
done or whatever. Finn mentions it or something. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
I don't know. It's just it's all over the place. That's the problem.
It, you bring up some good points that I hadn't considered. I guess for me, it was at the bottom of my list of things that were necessary for Rise of Skywalker. I'm like, first of all, I want to know how the Emperor just showed up. Just shows up. Where does he show up? He shows up in Fortnite. you know,
Yeah, yeah. That would have been so great in some other form.
how about
Something.
at the didn't was it you? You had the idea that it should have showed up at the end of Last Jedi, uh,
Clearly,
in like a message or something.
yeah. Clearly, it should have been at the end of The Last Jedi. They didn't know they were going to do it until they did it, right? And until
Yeah,
production on, or even like halfway through production or something, because it was that whole thing when Matt Smith was supposed to be in
right,
The Rise of Skywalker, and then he's completely not in it, like
right,
completely. So
right.
what's going on there? There's tons of rumors about who he was going to be and all that stuff, but clearly, if they ever made a The Last Jedi special edition, they should add that message from Fortnite. In fact, somebody could do it. You know, they
Yeah,
could just overlay it on top when everybody's sitting in the Falcon and everybody's happy, like, oh, we got away
yep,
from the First
yep.
Order, we survived, and then you hear the Emperor over comm or something. Like how amazing would that have been?
It would have been out of the blue, also because us as fans, we didn't know that. I mean, no one knew until you heard us laugh at the end
That's
of the trailer.
right,
So,
right.
I
Well,
mean,
and really, nobody knew. Like
no one.
that's kind of the point. Like even the people making the movie didn't know. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
but
But even like the child at the end of the first episode of The Mandalorian, all the fans, nobody knew that. There was no leaks, there was no spoilers
yeah,
on that.
that was
There
very
was
good.
there was nothing. And so you're watching the episode and you're seeing this thing and you're like, "What?" And that's an amazing feeling that I try to personally retain as much as possible, which is
Mm-hmm.
why trailers are so dangerous sometimes. But Yeah, it was, and that's also why everyone should watch the show as best you can as soon as possible before you go on social media.
Oh, totally.
Um,
Yeah.
that's just smart. There was a lot of people that when Game of Thrones was still a big thing, they wouldn't watch it for like a week, and then they're on Facebook every day, and they're getting butthurt because they got spoiled. And it's like,
Yeah.
sit your ass down and watch the fucking show.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to complain if you are waiting for an entire week. I can understand waiting a day or two, matching schedules with a friend or your girlfriend or whatever, but like, come on, don't get on social media then.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that's a side rant. People are
I
stupid.
it, anyway, I thought Rose was fine, just a little sappy, I guess, because
Yeah,
there was a lot of like, she was just sappy with like her sentiment about the
this is why we fight or whatever it is.
yeah, and when they go to the casino and all this stuff, and
Yeah, I I don't mind Rose, and I really like Kelly Marie Tran. I think her enthusiasm for being in a Star Wars movie was very apparent in all her interviews and everything. I mean, she was super stoked, and she's a great person. And it was sad to learn that she got rid of her Instagram over dumbasses, attacking her for
so social
stupid
media is
reasons.
terrible.
It
Social
is,
media was a mistake.
yeah, I'd say so. But anyway, uh, also returning for the voice cast is Billy D. Williams as Lando, who has done quite a bit of Star Wars voice things in recent years. He was, of course, on 2 or 3 episodes of Rebels.
Hmm.
He's done Lando for there was something else recently. He's done a few Lando things. And of course he was Lando in Jedi Outcast back in 2002. Remember that?
I remember it. I don't think he remembers it, but I remember it.
Let's recount that story for anyone who doesn't know. I'll give you the honors.
Well, what was it? Was it Celebration 2 or 3? I don't
I
even remember.
think
It
it
must
was
have been.
two. I think it was two because the game came out in February of '02, and we went in late April or early May of '02. So it had only been out for a few months, and it was like a fresh game.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was C2.
Yeah. So somebody asked him, he's up there giving the interview and stuff with I don't remember who was the MC at the time.
Right.
But gave an interview, then people got to, line up, ask questions. Somebody asked him about doing voice work for Jedi Outcast. He just had no recollection. And he just shut it down too. He's just like, I don't think I did
I don't
that.
remember that.
I don't
I
remember doing that.
I
It's
don't
like,
know what you're talking about.
yeah, exactly. That's basically what he said. I wish there was video of it somewhere of that panel, but
I just remember you and I just like looking at each other and just busting up because like I think as soon as we heard the kid ask the question, we were excited. Like I wanted to know what his thoughts were working outside of a Star Wars movie on something
well,
smaller.
and certainly back then, it's not like it is now. It's very mainstream and accepted for big actors,
Yeah,
even big voice actors, but big Hollywood actors to
absolutely.
lend their likeness or their voices to video games.
Yep.
Even I can't imagine 20 years ago getting these Star Wars actors to
I
be in
know.
a Lego holiday special, right?
I
But now it's like
know.
mainstream. And in video games, it was even worse. So it was like a big deal that Billy D did Lando in Jedi Outcast, and it was just kind of a bummer that he didn't even remember it. But he
Yeah,
must
and
he must have recorded it in like one afternoon or something.
yeah, it was probably really quick. And also back then, his involvement with Star Wars was minimal because the prequels were the main thing going on. And so
Yeah,
there wasn't a need outside of this one game. There was no need to get Billy D as Lando for different projects.
yeah,
Nowadays with the Disney era, they want to retain the iconic original actors as much as they can while they're still alive. Also, James Earl
Yeah.
Jones is way up there in age, and it was a blessing that he was able to do Rogue One as Vader and things like that. So I get that they want to involve everybody as much as they can. But yeah, 2002 or late 2001 when they might have recorded Billy, that was a little different for the original trilogy actors. They were
Yeah.
very busy, I'm sure, with other projects, living their lives. And Billy, he's just like he's got to pay his bills. He's like, oh, what can I do right now? Sure, I'll make a few $1,000, recording in an afternoon. But he probably didn't. There was no emotional involvement, I'm sure, with Billy D. Just doing a quick video game for a
Yeah.
day.
Because it wouldn't even
So
be like it wouldn't even be like some animated thing where maybe you see the
yeah,
characters on the screen.
yeah,
He would just
right.
be recording lines and that's it. There wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be anything for him to, create a frame of reference or whatever.
Right, right. So yeah, I understand. And yeah, whatever. Billy is awesome. We love him. So um yeah, and other voice cast members, Anthony as Daniels, the C3PO, who's
Oh,
of
really?
course,
They got him back?
yeah,
That's
I know
huge.
Anthony Daniels, no way. Um and that's the great thing though about C3PO, because he doesn't age or anything. And Anthony's voice is more or less the same over the years. Doesn't change the cadence very much with his age. So it's great that he can do 3PO in all eras that they need him. Um, so yeah, that's great. And
I will say too, the Rise of Skywalker. I'm a huge Palpatine fan,
mhm.
but my favorite part of the Rise of Skywalker was the amount of screen time and attention that 3PO got. Because I'm also a big
Yeah,
3PO fan. I was really
yes,
happy about that, especially
y-
after the droids getting kind of shuffled to the back with the sequel
yes,
trilogy.
yes. In the first two movies, they weren't significantly well. R2 was almost not even in the Force Awakens, except for the very end.
Yeah,
And yeah, you're right. I think everybody kind of felt like the droids needed more of a focus. So credit to the Rise of Skywalker for making it the most C3PO centric movie of all nine, basically. Um, well, I don't know. A New Hope still is kind of the golden standard with the
Return of the Jedi too, with the
yeah,
Ewoks a little bit.
yeah, that's true. But yeah, 3PO had a lot of good lines, very funny lines. I mean, I was just cracking up at all his stuff in the movie.
Yeah,
So that was great. And it's also good that Anthony can do these other little side projects and come back whenever they need him. Um, and then, of course, from the Clone Wars, you got Matt Lanter, who does Anakin. You got Tom Kane doing Yoda. And it says along with Qui-Gon Jinn. So I guess he occasionally does Qui-Gon for different things. And Tom Kane, he's also the guy that does the kind of the openings for the Clone Wars, where he's like, the galaxy at war.
right, right, yeah.
He's always good. And then James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan, who really nails Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan so good that like I can almost just kind of like close my eyes I mean, you could tell when it's Ewan, and everything, but like James Arnold Taylor does a great job of
Yeah, he
sounding like
does.
Ewan.
He's about as close as you can get without
Yeah,
getting Ewan McGregor.
yeah,
The I'd say the only like total replacement for any voice would be Scott Lawrence as Vader.
yes, yeah. I was
Like
gonna say,
that is nearly 100%.
yeah,
Everybody else is in the 90s or below.
yes, yes. Scott Lawrence, and it was great that he came back a couple years ago for Star Wars Resistance, doing that the character of I forget the name all of a sudden, but it was great that he's been involved with um, Lucasfilm in all kinds of voice roles. But when he came back and did Vader for Vader Immortal, from the clips I saw, I was just like, oh, they got James Earl Jones. Like, I didn't even think
Right, right.
it wasn't James Earl Jones.
And it's probably a time thing too, because probably at this point he sounds more like Vader than even James Earl Jones can do, because
I know.
his in Rogue One his voice was a little thin, I would
Yes.
say, and maybe that's a
Yes.
take thing. Like they
Yeah.
didn't. It could just be an issue with like how many takes they wanted to do, but
It sounds like Vader has like asthma or something in Rogue One, or there's something where he sounds a little wheezy.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I know.
That's what I mean, thin. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean. It's mainly when he's talking to Krennic on
Yeah.
in his castle.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but maybe he's just having a bad day or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it could have just been the take. Who knows? Um, but yeah, Scott Lawrence does a great job whenever he shows up as Vader, and he's been doing Vader off and on since the '90s. He did it for TIE Fighter. He did it for Rebel Assault 2.
It looks like he did it for Squadrons as well. Looking at his
Awesome.
IMDb,
Oh, that's
so
great. I think he did Rebel Assault 1, but Vader sounded weird in the original Rebel Assault, but I think that was him on the credits list, just going from my memory. But the way they masked the voice in that game was shit. Probably due to CD-ROM limitations or something. But
well, according to IMDb, he did Rebel Assault 2, but he's
not one.
not
Okay.
listed for 1.
Okay, that matches what I thought then from the game. Yeah.
Really, what they should do is they should use that technology that David Prowse featured in some YouTube video, the voice changer thing he was all excited about. That
Did
if they
he?
had, yeah,
I vaguely recall this.
there's some video for some technology that's a voice changer, and it was like a 20-minute video or something like that, and he was all excited
I
because
am Vader.
yeah, if according to him, if they had this technology back then, he could have been the voice of Darth Vader.
Right.
And it
Right.
was interesting. It's an interesting thing. It's just you guys picked the saddest like example of what this technology can do. Like you picked David Prowse whining
Right.
about being the voice of Darth Vader as
Right.
which
Right.
I mean really it was a good demo of the technology, but yeah,
Yeah.
they could do that. If Scott Lawrence doesn't want to do it, they could get David Prowse. He would. He's chomping at the bit. I'm
Yeah, we
guessing.
know he is. We know he is. Of course.
Although I would not be surprised if in the contract of the sale of Lucasfilm to Disney that Lucas stipulated that
No Prowse.
no Prowse.
Well, let's briefly go into that because we're basically done talking about the holiday special here. But
Yeah,
it's been, I mean, there was rumors over the years, but I think it's been more confirmed through various, I can't remember the source I read, but it was only a year ago. I read that it was basically in the late '80s or early '90s. David Prowse had been trash talking so much about what he brought to Star Wars and how he didn't get any credit, and all the credit to Vader seemed to go to James Earl Jones or whoever. It was always like he was miffed that he felt he should have got more money, a bigger percentage or whatever. But as anyone would say, like Mark Hamill chimed in an interview somewhere, he said most of the fighting, especially in Empire and Jedi, was Bob Anderson, who was the stunt guy who
yeah,
trained Mark on the sword fighting. So David mostly just did the talking scenes. The only movie he fought in was A New Hope, pretty
yeah.
much.
Clearly,
So yeah, and which I'm sure that due to budgetary restraints and other things, they couldn't get quite the epic lightsaber duel that you know could have been. But yeah, so there was some stipulation that Lucas at some point was just tired of all his trash talking in the media and just kind of said, we don't want David involved with any Lucasfilm events.
Yeah.
So whether that was celebrations or conventions, things like that, they just didn't want to call him for those things. And which of course is why whenever there was a celebration that we went to, he would always set up shop at the
Down the street.
the Ramada Inn lobby, like
Yeah.
down the street, and charge probably 50 to $200 for an autograph or whatever. And I don't deny the man a right to make a living doing that. I'm not saying he shouldn't, but you shouldn't bilk the fans for something that isn't quite accurate. You're not Darth Vader as a whole. Darth Vader is Ralph McQuarrie's armor design, mask design. It's a combination of James Earl Jones and Ben Burt. It's John Williams' music layered on top of it. You're not the be all end all of Darth Vader.
Yeah. You're a guy in a mask. You're his physique,
You're a
which is
sad
fine.
man in an iron mask.
Yeah, well, it's a gravy train, right? Like he could be set up on the gravy train of doing the convention circuit, hanging out with the other actors and stuff.
I know.
Being in the official conventions and stuff, but I don't know. I don't know why you have a chip on his shoulder about it.
This has been similar to other Star Wars actors that have tried to cash in a little bit more and ask for more money. Usually they're not called back. We know that Hugh Corshi, who played Captain Panaka, he was all set to play the same role in Attack of the Clones.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, I remember this goes way back to the Force.net news report, like in 2000 or something. Apparently, the report was that he asked for more money than the Phantom Menace, and Lucasfilm at that point just said no thanks, and they just wrote the character of Captain Typho from scratch, and that was it.
Yeah. And
also,
nobody cared.
And no one cared. The actor, what's his name? It's Peter. He has a strangely pronounced last name. He did the voice of Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace. He has trash talked, even though he just did the voice, he trash talked working on that movie. Oh, he also did Sebulba. So he did Sebulba and Darth Maul. He trash talked so much in interviews after that movie, saying, "Oh,
Why?
fuck Lucas." I don't even know. He just sounded like an asshole, in all honesty. And so, ever since the Phantom Menace, if they needed a Sebulba or Darth Maul, they never went to him again. That was his only involvement with Lucasfilm.
Peter Serafinowicz.
Yeah, it's him, and I think he's a British actor, and he's worked on a lot of other projects. He has quite the resume. And I've even seen a YouTube interview with him where he just kind of like just shat totally on Lucas and Lucasfilm, and it's like, dude, like,
it's really weird. I just
what the hell?
I wonder what it could be like, especially when he would just be voicing lines, right? He would just go into the studio.
I think in some cases, I don't know about him because he's just doing ADR, but in some cases, like Terrence Stamp really had a negative view that all his acting was in front of blue screen, because he said in interviews that he hated that. He's like, yeah, I acted with Natalie Portman and Ian McDiarmid, but it was all in front of blue screen, and I couldn't see the creatures, and I couldn't see this and that. And this is a Shakespearean actor who's used to working on stage.
Yeah, that's the thing that weirds me out. Like, anytime you go to a stage production, there's very little scenery and stuff.
Well,
it's all...
I think still he was lamenting the face-to-face performance. I guess because probably also because of editing. Maybe in a lot of cases, Natalie or Ian wasn't there, and he was just literally acting to an entirely blue screen. When
Yeah,
we
but
look at
that's
the
but that's
Senate, yeah, I
that's
know.
stage acting. I mean, but
Also,
again, that's also like the transition period for that,
all
right? Like,
yeah, but also none of that should have been a fucking surprise. It was
yeah.
1997 when they filmed it. It was the late 90s. The CG environments were just starting to get good enough to where you could do these huge CG sets. Actually, The Phantom Menace, I think, is the key movie of that era that kicked off a new kind of breakthrough as far as like CG backgrounds,
Yeah.
because that was very minimal in movies before then.
Well, I'm Ian McKellen had the same uh, problem on Lord of the Rings. There was some
Oh, did
times
he?
he'd get stressed out. Um, about the blue screen work and stuff, and especially for
Yeah,
him, because
yeah,
even if the actors were there, they'd use the forced perspective, so
yeah,
they
yeah.
might be like far away from the camera, so he'd be like
Right.
acting with them, but they wouldn't be right in front of him and stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I get it. There's instances where you might get frustrated with having to do that, and with Terrence Stamp, he might have a completely different attitude toward it now,
Yeah, he
versus
could.
I remember um, the other actors had problems too with the Phantom Menace in general, writing and
Uh,
stuff,
yeah.
and especially coming right out of it, they might. And if there's any sort of negative press, it might be easier for them to like poo poo the movie. But
Mm-hmm.
with the benefit of time and perspective, they might have a totally different attitude toward their
Yeah.
time working
And
on it and
I
stuff.
know even Ewan said it was difficult. He didn't really like he wasn't pissed off about it. He said it was difficult to be in front of blue screen doing so much work all the
Yeah,
time on
yeah,
those movies, but obviously he was still very enthusiastic and thankful for his time on the movies. And I mean, I'm sure that now, 15 years later or whatever, he's looking back and ready to. He probably has a more um, rose tinted view of Star Wars now that it's all this time has passed. He can kind of understand the context of everything he went through on the
yeah.
prequels.
Well, and it's normal now, right?
Yeah,
Like we were saying, when Phantom Menace was made, that was all new.
that was.
Lucas was breaking new ground on the technological aspect of making movies with animatics and all this stuff,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all the green screen. And then now it's just like, I mean, if you see any behind the scenes footage of almost any movie that is got a lot of special effects in it and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it's all green screen,
Absolutely.
like
So,
totally.
yeah, that was just kicking off a whole new era. And Lucas even said it at the time. This movie is going to change how things are done as far as special effects and what can be done as CG character creation, with Jar Jar having the first all digital main character that
Mm-hmm.
interacts with actors. He kept, I remember like in 97, before we even knew the name of Jar Jar, or what he looked like or anything, he kept talking about this. He and McCallum kept talking about this all CG character,
Yeah.
and we knew it was a creature, but it was funny reading those interviews, and I reread them a few years back, where it's like they were you didn't know what to expect. You just knew there was going to be this character. And I remember Lucas saying that he talked weird. He said it's something like it's Yoda times 10. And I was like, huh,
He
you know.
wasn't wrong. he,
He wasn't wrong. Yeah. But anyway, I guess that's a whole other side subject. We could go into Phantom Menace topics later on for sure. Um, but yeah, actually, let's get to the main topic of today's episode, which we got a couple things. First we're going to be
you mean
talking
the
about.
main topic wasn't wasn't crapping on David Prowse.
I thought it might have been. It might have been there for 10 minutes. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Bantam era of Star Wars novels, 1991 to 99, and then a little bit later we'll be focusing specifically on Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, uh, with which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, and that might not be a big deal to even most Star Wars fans, but I love that book, and I wanted to give it a nice tribute in 2020. Um, but yeah, first we'll talk about the Bantam era as a whole. So last episode we touched on Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which we, even though that was Del Rey, that was one of our first Star Wars novels, just like with the classic trilogy novelizations. Um, and that was one of the first for us. I think it's safe to say that like the Bantam era is kind of where our fandom started,
Yeah,
because the Thrawn trilogy came out in 91, or Heir to the Empire did, and I started in 94. I mean, I was playing the video games and Super Star Wars and stuff, Rebel Assault before then, but I consider the novel era to be when my hardcore fandom began,
same
beyond
for
just,
me.
yeah, X-Wing and TIE Fighter and stuff like that. Now, okay, we talked about reading the trilogy and Splinter. Besides those, what was your next Star Wars novel? I know for me, I think it was Heir to the Empire, like right after I read those.
Well, I remember it probably in '92.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a friend of mine had, I think he had Heir to the Empire on hardback. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking, I was like, oh, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's a new Star Wars novel. It's like, oh, that's cool. They're writing,
Right.
continuation of the story. But I didn't really think much of it. And then later, in about probably '94, um, yeah, I had played Super Star Wars and stuff, so like it was still on my mind, Star Wars on my mind. But
Mm-hmm.
then when I saw
Mm-hmm.
that there was more books, and I think it was, I think another friend of mine had Truce at Bakura.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which came
uh,
out in hardback, I believe, December 93, and was in paperback by fall 94.
yeah, so I think it was late, must have been late '94 because I don't remember him having the hardback,
Yeah.
but he had this new Star Wars book, True Sakura, and it was like, another one that was post Return of the Jedi, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Maybe, I want to maybe read these because it
Right.
sounds pretty cool. And there was other stuff. I think we had played Rebel Assault,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, um,
Mm-hmm.
and the Super Star Wars games. So at that point, what I did is that's when I started with A New Hope novelization.
Right.
And then, at least in that time period of the probably around 94, 95, I was reading everything in sequence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did A New Hope, then I read Splinter of the Mind's Eye, then I read Empire and Return, and then Truce of Bakura, and then Courtship of Princess Leia.
Mm-hmm. I almost did it in sequence, like I mentioned last episode. I had intended to read A New Hope, then Splinter, then Empire, then Jedi. I failed because I kept reading the omnibus, having forgotten. Although I think I didn't own Splinter quite yet, so it was like
Yeah,
I gotta get it. But I read the trilogy. It was like the first week of high school. I remember that. I just moved
yeah.
into a new house, just started high school. That first week, got the trilogy omnibus, and then read Splinter. I think about a month later, might have been a few weeks later, and then I think it was November. I had intended, because the back of Truce at Bakura, it says picks up right after Return of the Jedi. I had
Hmm.
intended to read that next, but again, at the bookstore, I'd kind of forgotten. because I'm just seeing all these books, and maybe that one wasn't available that day. Like I'm scanning my, whatever's at Barnes and Noble, and they might have been out of it or something.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
saw the Thrawn trilogy, and I'm like, oh, it's Thrawn from TIE Fighter. Like, and at this point, I was already, I kind of remember Heir to the Empire because I think when it came out, and this is a very distinct memory, when it came out, I recall the first time I saw it, I was at, I don't know if it was B. Dalton or Walden Books, because I always mix those up
What's
because they
the
were
difference?
there was no difference really. But I was at the mall. I want to just say, we'll just say it was Walden Books probably. And I remember on an end cap just seeing Heir to the Empire in hardback. And I remember picking it up and seeing Joris Sabath with the lightning coming out of his fingers. And I
Hmm?
remember I was only 11 years old at the time, so I'm like, Heir to the Empire. I'm like, what do they mean? What's hair? I didn't know how to say air yet,
Right, right.
or I didn't know how to spell it exactly. But I just remember going, oh, cool, okay, a new Star Wars novel. But again, like you, just kind of put it in the back of your mind, like whatever. Um, but yeah, so I grabbed the paperback of that in November '94, and then through December into January, I continued the rest of the Thrawn trilogy. And let's talk about the Thrawn trilogy. We won't spend too long on each novel because I want to get through most or all of the Bantam era. But I think it's safe to say that that whole trilogy was like perfection for us and most fans, right?
It was good. I wouldn't go as far as saying perfection, only because it's like it was the first, right? It's like saying
Yeah,
that A New Hope is perfection.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
I don't know that there's anything that's like, is that much better than the
Well,
Thrawn trilogy.
I kind of equate it as it's the Empire Strikes Back of books. It was really, really, really damn good. And
Yeah, yeah.
what was also cool about
Well, it
Heir to
definitely
the Empire,
set the benchmark, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, what was great though about Heir to the Empire was I didn't know anything about the story, so I didn't know where it was going to go, And I remember Zahn was really good at laying out little clues and mysteries because, you know, people kind of forget about this because now the book has been around for nearly 30 years. But I remember being so intrigued about who Delta Source was. That was like, how are they finding out what the rebels are doing? Like, who's this Delta Source? Why are they not? Well, it's still not revealed. And I think it was not until the beginning of The Last Command before we found out it was that little Shala tree in the Imperial Palace that like Han or other people, if they touched that tree, it would send the signal down to the comm, which then sent an encoded transmission to Thrawn or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just such a cool little mystery, and it was. And then when you would go back and reread the novels, you could pick up those little pieces on the second reading, which is always nice. Um, I didn't know what was going to happen with Mara Jade. She was an interesting character, a good foil for Luke. Um, I didn't have a problem really with her. I think some fans kind of had issues with her being connected to the Emperor or being like, you
Well,
know,
I think it's a retroactive thing where she was fine, but it sort of opened the floodgates to all of these dark Jedi and
hmm
Force adepts and like the Emperor having tons of like these low level Force users to do his bidding
right,
beyond Darth Vader being his right hand man and enforcer
right,
and
and
heir and stuff.
who almost always died by the end of whatever novel they were in. So it's like, how powerful were they really? Like Dark Empire 2 is often criticized because he has all these dark Jedi that are just like taken out almost like stormtroopers by Luke and the other characters, and it's just like, okay, like Executor Cedrus and
Yeah.
all those guys. But yeah, okay, so Mara was, yeah, it did open those floodgates with her. She was well written though, I gotta say, and then of course Thrawn. I mean, how can we? He was a great character. He was very charming. He was very he was intelligent, but I love that Zahn didn't make him the stereotypical Imperial villain. Like Vader and the Emperor really did rule by fear, pretty much. And so when Thrawn doesn't kill the guy for messing up on the tractor beam and instead says, I want you to do better,
Yeah.
you really got that feeling that he was a good leader.
Yeah, he just wasn't the typical pure evil, right? He was just sort of a normal guy in that system,
Yeah.
in the Imperial system, which that system would have to have tons of those guys.
Right.
Somebody that isn't necessarily in it for whatever evil plans the Empire has. It's and later on they even the Emperor they sort of retcon the whole Yuzhan Vong threat to be like a motivation for certain things like the Death Star and stuff like that.
Right. And actually I really like those theories and ideas because it really does make a lot of sense and it's kind of cool. The idea of the Emperor doing what he's doing just for selfish desires and reasons to just be evil and rule the galaxy always struck me as kind of one-dimensional. I feel like he's such an interesting character. Like I think he needs more of a backstory as to why he's doing what he's doing,
Yeah. It adds dimensions and it's really nice. I mean, that's I kind of wish they touched on that in the Plagueis book, but they didn't really.
No,
it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting if they touched on the coming Yuzhan Vong threat, but
I know, and they really should have because that book was late in the old EU's timeline, so they could have tied together with more things. But
especially if it wasn't just like Palpatine worrying about it, right? If it was like something that
a Sith thing,
like Plagueis knew about it or something about it,
right?
And it was some overall motivation for what the Sith were doing, aside from power, which is fine. Like,
right.
That's a fine motivation too, but it makes it more interesting if there's more layers to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can't agree more. Let's see. I'm looking down a list here of the other Bantam novels, and I'll briefly just say that after I read the Thrawn trilogy, I was like, oh yeah, I got to read the Han and Lando books, even though we're talking about Del Rey here for a second. But my cousin had already read the Han Solo adventures. He picked that up at the same time I got another Star Wars novel. So he read those before me, and I remember him describing the story a little bit and telling me about like the scene with Chewbacca kidnapped by the corporate sector authority in Han Solo at Star's End, and those were some great books. We'll focus on the Han and Lando books probably more in depth later, but I read the Han Solo adventures around the same time as Truce at Bakura. What did you think of Truce at Bakura? I reread it a couple times since the 90s, but it never really quite sticks with me, and it's one of those Star Wars novels that has great concepts, like the entekment process by the Cyruk.
I liked
And
it.
yeah, did you like it overall?
I liked all that stuff. It was really interesting.
I think that's where I'm coming at, though. I think the concept was great, and I think the characters and the situations and the idea of the Imperials and the Rebels teaming up to fight the Cyruk, that was cool. I just felt like the prose of Kathy Tyers and some of the dialogue and the nitty gritty things, that's just where it was kind of weak for me.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff. I can't remember that stuff because I typically have never gone and reread any of the books. So
Yeah.
my memories are, you know, solidified in ice in my brain from
Yeah.
30 years, 20 to 30 years
Yeah.
of memory.
That's true. Well, that's why it's good that I'm here, because I've not only reread them in some cases in the late 90s or early 2000s with the prequel era, but I pretty much starting in 2015, most of these Bantam novels I did reread. There's still a few I need to revisit, but by and large, it's nice because I'm able to compare and contrast my original memory and how I reacted then to now. So
Yeah.
it's kind of fun.
Well, let's talk about the Black Fleet crisis.
Oh yeah. Um, you know,
However many times you reread
I
that, stopped and
oh
started it.
man. Let's go into that for a moment. So, the Black Fleet crisis from 1996. Um, I picked up Before the Storm, the first book, pretty much. I think it was the day it came out, based on my memory of when I got it, and then like looking up things online as to like what week it came out. I think I got it like the first day, and I picked it up the same night. It was at Barnes and Noble in Ventura at their old location. It was the same night as a bargain book. I found the hardback of The Courtship of Princess Leia. I'd already had the paperback, but I remember it was always nice when they'd put out older hardbacks from a year or two earlier, for
Mm-hmm.
$5. So I was like, yeah, cool. And it had different artwork than the paperback version. So grabbed that the same night. I think I had to finish reading the first X-Wing book. So I picked up Before the Storm, but I was still stuck on Rogue Squadron because I read one chapter and kind of like lost interest
Mm-hmm.
immediately, and it was weird. But then I finished Rogue Squadron out of kind of a sense of haste because I wanted to get to Before the Storm. So then when I got to Before the Storm about a week later, this was like early April 96. I loved that book. That was the first Star Wars novel since the Thrawn trilogy where the writing was good, the prose was great. It was military sci-fi, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the X-Wing books and the Thrawn trilogy. So it was written by an author that was very proficient with military scenarios. And that always makes a big difference for me personally.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know why, but um so that was great. And then so I read it, and then later in the year, when Shield of Lies came out, the second book, I read that. I didn't reread Before the Storm. I read Shield of Lies by itself. But then when the third book came out, Tyrant's Test, in December 96, I remember I was like, oh, well, before I read that one, I should probably reread the other two. So in January 97, this is like right around the time I met you and Jess.
That was the beginning of the end of your progress into the Star
Yeah,
Wars novels.
yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. It's all your fault. I met you. Um, yeah, I was like, okay, the special edition of Star Wars is coming out. I'm trying to cram all these novels, rereading and reading. I was like, I should reread Before the Storm. So that was my first reread of it, and it's weird. It's one of those things. Again, I can specifically remember where I was. I because I was I was stuck sitting in the car my mom had gone into Ventura to the government center, and I think, based on my memory, I think that she was literally doing some kind of paperwork when she was divorcing my dad.
Yeah,
Based on
exciting.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, very exciting. But I think that's why she was there, based on my memory of it. But I was stuck in the car outside in the parking lot at the government center for like, dude, I think I was out there for like 4 hours in the car. And I remember it was even like kind of hot. And so I'm reading Before the Storm, rereading it. And it got so hot, I was like, damn, I need to open the door. So I'm reading a book, Star Wars novel, doors open. And I actually finished it in the parking lot there before she even came out. So then that was the second rereading. Shield of Lies, I don't think I got to on a reread that year. About 3 years later, I started the trilogy again because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read them all three in order. I'm gonna do it now. Well, maybe I should reread Before the Storm. Okay. So reread number 3 of Before the Storm. Shield of Lies got its second reread, but I still never got to Tyrant's Test.
Uh-huh.
This was late 2001, early 2002.
And this whole time, like,
This whole time, the New Jedi Order is kicking off.
yeah,
There's like
I
Vector
was like,
Prime.
I had continued on, and I'd be like, hey, these are really good. You should read these books.
Yeah.
When are you gonna read the New Jedi Order? Well, I gotta get through the
I've been
Black
saying
Fleet
that for
crisis.
21 years. Literally. You know what? Actually, at the 21st anniversary of Vector Prime, if it wasn't last month, it's this month. Because I know it
Mm-hmm.
was fall. But, and then fast forward. So it never even happened during the prequel era. I never finished that trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward decades later, in 2012, uh, like 15 plus years after the trilogy has ended, I uh, I was finally like, fuck it. I'm just gonna cut right to the third book and just read the third book, and didn't even reread the first two. I was just
Yeah,
like, fuck it.
that's why
So
they
I did
have
it.
Wikipedia. You know,
That's why they
that's what you
have
needed
Wikipedia.
back then. You needed Wikipedia
I
for the
I
overview.
know. I know. Instead, I had tons of reference guides and RPG books laid out on my bedroom floor with
Yeah.
notes and all this stuff. So, but it still took me a year to read it because 2012 was when I was extremely social. I was going out a lot. It was my party years and everything. So it took me like a year. I started, I think, in the summer, and I think it was January 2013 when I finished the book. It was like a 6 month process. And again, I really sat down and read most of it over a couple days, but it was like
Mm-hmm.
the first 100 pages. I was like, oh, okay, one chapter here, and then 3 months later, another chapter, so on and so forth.
That
So
sounds like me trying to reread the Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina.
yes, which we'll get to later here, and so it's funny. I've even since then picked up the trilogy again. I reread Before the Storm, I think for the fourth time a couple years ago,
Can you
thinking I was
recite that? Can you recite that from memory now?
almost. It's one of the most read Star Wars novels I've read. I've read
Mm-hmm.
the trilogy 4 or 5 times. I've read Heir to the Empire about 3 or 4 times. I've read the Lando books about 4 times, I think.
And you still haven't gotten. I don't know if it's even worth it now. Maybe it is,
The
but you
New
still
Jedi
haven't
Order.
even gotten the New Jedi Order, right?
No, no, and literally like 3 years ago, because I make lists and plans of attack, where I'm like, okay, I could read this week and this month, whatever. I like to plan things ahead so I can kind of organize whatever projects I have going on. And almost every year, it's like, okay, I really want to read the New Jedi Order, but before I do that, I need to read Young Jedi Knights because that connects to it. And it's like, well, before
Yeah.
I do that, I got to read Junior Jedi Knights. So there's always this thing. And then even before that, I'm like, well, I want to reread the Hand of Thrawn duology because I only read those once. And I would like to lead those into Survivor's Quest, which connects to, Young Jedi Knights a little bit right before. So the problem with Star Wars novels and my brain, really the problem with my brain, let's face it, is that sometimes I need to refresh things,
Mm-hmm.
or I feel like I soak in more enjoyment if I understand the connections to the various stories. I want to be, in other words, I want to be able to pick up and notice the threads of everything I can as I read as close together as possible because
See, I'm satisfied with after the fact reading. Now,
yeah,
especially now, because now you can go to YouTube and there's all these videos
yes.
about all the Easter eggs you missed in this thing.
Right, right. I know I'm autistic. What can I say? That's just how it is. But I'm trying to get better at it, and luckily, I have made huge progress on my Star Wars reading, even though a vast portion of it is rereading. I'm glad I have in these last 5 years since the Disney era began because it's enabled me to keep one foot in the old EU and one foot in the canon and kind of notice the parallels or the in some cases the recanonizations that we've talked about. Um,
So did
yeah.
you basically finish out all the pre New Jedi Order novels? Did
Uh,
you ever close those out for the most part, like the main
I
ones? Like,
I think I did. Let me just scan down the list
well,
here because
because
I
you
have it.
you read New Rebellion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I did. I read them all.
the Thrawn
There.
duology. You read
Yeah,
those?
yeah. I even read Tales from the New Republic, which was mostly reprints of adventure journal short stories, but there was about three or four original stories in there. So I read the
Yeah,
original.
and
So
you read Survivor's Quest.
actually, that's the Del Rey era. That was under Del Rey, so I did
Was it?
not read that. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, if you look at the chronology of the stories, I think it ends at Vision of the Future as far as the Bantam era.
Oh,
Um,
I'm looking at the actual chronology.
oh, you're okay. Yeah. Yeah, because Survivor's Quest picks up, I think,
Yeah,
17 ABY or 21 ABY, whatever. I see. I still think in post Battle of Endor years.
2022
Right,
ABY.
right. I think that takes place right before the Young Jedi Knights books. But
Which
yes,
I read all those.
yeah, I've
Those were fun.
let's while we're on that subject, let's talk about other books I've owned for decades and never read. Um, so Young Jedi Knights, I started to read again. This was actually right around the time of the special edition because I picked up Heirs of the Force, the first book. I got about two or three chapters in. I think I started reading it at Barnes and Noble on the day I bought it. I was just hanging out there. I got two or three chapters in. I bought it, took it home, and I got sidetracked and I never continued that read in the 90s. And this
Uh-huh.
is despite owning the whole set in those years. I
Mm-hmm.
picked them up eventually. Um, Fast forward to 2017, 20 years later. I did read Heirs to the Force. I did finally finish my first Young Jedi Knights book. Um,
So only
I
only 13 more to go.
Yeah, I did read The Shadow Academy, the second book,
Okay.
and then I got sidetracked. So I still need to finish the Lost Ones, or I need to start the Lost Ones and the rest. Will it happen? Yes. Time will tell if I could just focus. on one thing at a time. See
Your
that?
focus determines your reality.
Oh God, my focus is 30,000 things I'm doing at once.
Well,
My
you'll have a
problem,
lot of time in the old folks' home. You can be sitting there reading your Young Jedi Knights
yes.
physical copies.
So, in addition to having laser focus on one thing, my problem is that I enjoy too many things. So I have like 30 fires cooking over for 30 fires, 30 pans cooking over 30 fires
Right.
at any given time. We've talked about this a lot. So if it's not an NES game I'm playing one day, it's a
Well,
magazine thing I'm downloading another day and researching, and then it's like there's a
certainly
billion things.
nowadays, certainly nowadays, there's a lot of distractions,
There's a lot of
and
distractions.
also not a heck of a lot of motivation to, uh, invest in the old EU if
Yes,
if presumably it doesn't
doesn't
matter. I mean, I
really.
know canon is what you make of it and stuff. It's fine, but
Right. I believe in absolute headcanon that tries to merge 99% of it all together. Thank you, Dave Filoni, for Worlds Between Worlds, because I can kind of cheat and do that.
yeah, I had a voracious appetite for reading the Star Wars novels, and I remember, the Young Jedi Knight books. I remember at least one of the books I was able to read in a day. Like that's how
Yes,
excited I was to read
right.
those
They're
those
very short
books.
reads. They're only about 200 pages, I think.
Yeah.
And the typeface of the
Hmm.
page doesn't have a lot of text on the page compared to an adult
Yeah,
Bantam
and well,
novel.
and they were exciting me too because they were like teasing, Palpatine returning or whatever.
Right, right. In that one book, The Emperor's Plague,
Yeah.
and actually, they were very serialized. Because they would have these arcs, usually
Yes.
in groups of three, but they were also very good at then the end of that arc might set up the next arc. And
Hmm.
I mean, from what I understand, obviously, I'm going by summaries and guidebooks to
Yeah, no,
me, but
it was very it was all interconnected really well.
yeah.
And
I'm still aware of the broad strokes of the story. I know
right.
some of the characters. So
So I had a voracious appetite to read everything and also not the patience to reread anything, so I never got hung up like you did.
right,
And I
right.
got all the way through the New Jedi Order, and I remember when I was done with the unifying force, I was, for
You
whatever
were
reason,
done,
I was
done.
done.
Yeah,
Because I didn't read it right when it came out because I had this backlog of stuff and
yeah.
all this stuff going on. So I think I read it in summer of 2004. So
Hmm.
like at least 6 months after it came out.
Yeah.
And I kind of took a break. And I think I guess looking at the other novels, there wasn't really anything else coming out until the Dark Nest trilogy started
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
2005, and that would have been after um, the Revenge of the Sith. So
Yes.
the combination of like the movies ending and then the New Jedi Order ending, that was it. I was like long hiatus.
That's what
So
I did too.
I never got around to reading the Dark Nest trilogy or any of the Legacy era,
Right.
which is sad because Aaron Alston is one of my favorite Star Wars authors, and he
Hmm.
was so heavily involved in the
He
Legacy era
was.
books.
He was. And I know I'm sad about that too. He was a great author, great guy. He signed my Wraith Squadron book at C2 or C3. I
I
think it was
remember that.
C2.
Yeah,
And he actually wrote Yub Yub in there, and I
yeah.
forgot about it when I opened that book up to reread it a few years ago, and I had forgotten he signed it. And it was just so funny and amazing to see his signature
As
in there, especially because he passed away, a
yeah,
while back.
as much as I like Stackpole, as he's one of the better Star Wars writers,
Yeah.
and a lot of fun to read. I think Aaron Alston is more fun to read. Like the comedy that
Yeah.
he injects into the
Yes.
X-wing books is
Yes.
great.
I think his Star Wars literature legacy is absolutely set in stone by the
Mm-hmm.
fans. Like everyone kind of agrees, and he and Stackpole. It's funny when you read the X-wing books in sequence. They're they worked together really well because their style is similar,
Mm-hmm.
but Aaron Alston's was just different enough to where it had its own voice, and because they were both military sci-fi guys, but obviously Alston had a little bit more humor in there, but it wasn't forced humor. It was like really witty, kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I remember laughing out loud all the
Yes,
time reading those books. And
absolutely.
they both did. Stackpole and Aaron Alston did a great job of. They took something that could have been super dry,
Hmm.
like the X-wing books could have been super dry, but they were really fun to read,
Yep.
even if you weren't a big military sci-fi fan.
Yeah,
Um,
and actually, it's a good tangent to go off on now while we're bringing up the X-wing books. So actually, those were ones. The first five I read basically as they came out. Well, there was a couple I was few months late on, but
mm-hmm.
I more or less read most of those as they came out. Rogue Squadron came out in early '96. I read that within a month or so, a couple months. Wedge's Gamble, I read right away. It was like July '96. The Kratos Trap and the Back to War, I remember holding off on those because I'm like, I want to read them before the special editions, like right before. And so I ended up still getting delayed, but I read those in late '97. So they had been out for almost a year when I read those. But then Wraith Squadron, I read right away. In fact, I think I still have the receipt from Borders where I got it. And then Iron Fist, I think it was. Let's see here. Well, there's Solo Command. Yeah, X-Wing Iron Fist. Iron Fist and Solo Command, I read in 2001, so they were already 2 years old. And then the same thing with Isard's Revenge when Stackpole came back for that story, which is set post Thrawn trilogy. And then Alston had the last book, Starfighters of Adumar. So I read that in 2001 also. Um,
It's a bummer that Stackpole's trilogy in the New Jedi Order got cut down to a duology.
yeah, yeah, I know. Um, I, I even remember the titles because like StarWars.com released like the titles of like the first 6 or 7
Mm-hmm.
books, and I remember it was gonna be Onslaught, Siege, and Ruin.
Yeah,
And so Siege got cut, and I think it was just Onslaught and Ruin.
yeah,
But he basically condensed them, I think, to one story. And there was another there was another trilogy that got cut. It was like the Nightfall trilogy of the New Jedi Order.
yeah,
That was going to be a side thing with Danny Quee and some other original Jedi character, and that entire trilogy got cut. Um,
yeah.
so
It's
yeah,
weird to think about, because they had planned out that series pretty well in advance,
yeah,
and they were kind of fitting things in. It's interesting to think about like a whole trilogy just getting dropped off
I
of
know.
that series.
Yeah, seriously. Anyway, Stackpole's X-wing books, great. I think there's criticism for Corran Horn being too perfect, and that he's like this amazing, incredible X-wing pilot. Plus, he's force sensitive. and learns the ways of the Jedi.
And
Plus,
he's special as a Force user, right? Because he doesn't have the telekinesis proficiency. It was
right,
what was it? It was like energy conversion or
energy
something.
absorption. I
Absorption,
can't
something like
quite
that.
remember. Yeah, even though I reread uh, several of those a couple years ago, I'm trying to remember. I know he had his like Jed cred. It was like his Jedi Corellian coin that he kept on like a chain around his neck as like a, which I think came from his father. It was I think that's where it was. Like it was just a memento, and then it was supposed to be something that Corellian Jedi's would. It was something like if they had a family, if the Jedi passed away, this coin would be given to the family, something like that.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, but then it was called a Jed cred. But
It's
yeah,
been
he
about
had
20
that.
years since I read I Jedi, but
Yeah, I know. Even actually, I Jedi, I've not read since it came out, but that was one I read like the day it came out, or the day I bought it. I I remember this well. I was at Borders with my dad, and this is in May '98. So I saw it there. I was like, "Oh, awesome!" And it was weird too because back in the days of early internet or pre-internet, sometimes you would just see a Star Wars novel just randomly just pop
yeah.
up. This is before StarWars.com was like onslaughting you with news or things, you know. So you sometimes, yeah, you just see um, you know, stuff come up, and so I the thing was Borders hardbacks were always a little bit more. And so
Mm.
I was like telling my dad, I was like, you know, because he's buying it for me. I was like, oh, let's go over to Barnes and Noble. We'll save 20% or whatever on hardbacks. And my dad was like, okay, hey, you're saving me 8 bucks, whatever, sure. So we drove over to Westlake Village, like 10 minutes away or
Right,
whatever,
right.
and then
Yeah.
save a few bucks. Probably use the same on gas. But
Well,
um,
and Barnes and Noble had the or has the you know, the discount program or whatever too. If
yeah,
you're like
yeah,
a member or whatever, get the
yeah,
discount card.
that was kind of my along the lines of my thinking, and so yeah, I just remember grabbing that. I started reading it right away. I think I was done within 2 or 3 days of iJedi. Of course, there was the infamous like horny scene, I guess you would call it, where he's captured by the Leonia Tavira, that Imperial Moff that's like the 20-year-old, you know, hot
Mm-hmm.
young woman, and she's enticing him to like join the Empire, and like he's thinking like selfishly, like if he did it, he would just have access to all these Imperial secrets, and he'd be able to eventually break out and take advantage of the situation, and he would also be able to, yeah, be physically with her and all these things. And
Yeah.
Corrin basically gets a boner, like in the novel. Like
Right.
Stackpole describes his loins like feeling something in his loins or something. And it was like
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking, wow, this is a bit different than uh,
Thanks, Stackpole.
yeah, thanks, Stackpole. Um so it was a very adult Star Wars novel. It didn't hold back in a lot of
Compared
ways.
to others, yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting in that regard. And so, and then let me look at this list here. We got um oh, the Jedi Academy trilogy. How could we forget about the wonderful efforts of Kevin J. Anderson? What
I
are your
liked that
thoughts?
series. I
You like it?
liked it. It's fine. You know, you can afford to be really forgiving with the old EU because they're kind of all over the place anyway. They're books. You don't have to take them as canon. They didn't come from Lucas, all that stuff. So if something's like kind of crappy or not quite up to the standards of the Thrawn trilogy, it's like, whatever. That's fine.
Yeah, and
It's not on screen. You know, back then it was like, if it's on screen, it's absolute canon. If it's not on screen, it's like kind of fuzzy, right? And so it was easier to process the crap, or what would, maybe be considered crap.
right. I look at that trilogy as being very comic book like. It's written
Mm-hmm.
very simplistic. It's very easy to pick up, very easy to get into. You could be 12 years old and enjoy it. You could be 20 years old and you'll enjoy it. It's not the Thrawn trilogy. It's very much comic book serial, kind of in the spirit of Flash Gordon, and
Mm-hmm.
the influences of Star Wars. It's just like lightsaber battles and space battles, and it's not intricate.
Yeah.
And I remember being really intrigued by the whole concept of the Jedi Academy and Luke training new students in the Force, and um, the idea of the Maw cluster and the prototype Death Star, and Tarkin having the secret facility that even the Emperor didn't know about. I mean, it was like just as concepts, these were awesome, amazing things.
Yeah.
And I think Kevin J. Anderson's criticisms mostly came from older Star Wars fans that liked Zahn, that just felt like his stuff was lacking in depth. And
He had to follow, follow up the Thrawn trilogy, right? And
yeah,
it's really hard to do that.
it really is. And when you compare the Jedi Academy books to the other ones, the other non-Zahn ones surrounding it, they're great. It's way better than the Crystal Star by Vonda McIntyre, which we
Mm-hmm.
don't even really need to go into at all. That's
Yeah,
just I wouldn't call
they
that book.
exist.
Yeah, I wouldn't call the Crystal Star abysmal. I have enjoyed it on my rereadings over the years.
Yeah,
The Truce at Bakura, the Jedi Academy trilogy, is way better than that, in my opinion. Um, the only other one, like trilogy or something, I think that is possibly better or as good is the Corellian trilogy
yeah,
by Roger McBride Allen, which I guess I'll mention now is was even better on a reread about 5 years ago. His prose is really good. He understands military stuff. Characters are great. The setting of the Corellian system is great. He was the first author to show Corellia, like maybe not visually, but he was the first one
to feature it. Yeah, to
to feature
feature
it
it.
and develop it and create, the background on the city of Coronet, which we've seen in the movie Solo now. I mean, Coronet
Yeah,
is named and existed because of the Corellian trilogy.
yeah,
Um, and those were all threads that Stackpole and other authors picked up on when they revisited Corellia in various books. So that's a trilogy that's very interesting, and it has Thraken Sal Solo, Han's quote unquote evil cousin,
yeah.
who is
Looks
one
like
of
him.
who basically looks like Harrison Ford in The Fugitive.
Yep,
If
yep.
you could tell on the Struzan paintings that he just took the Fugitive images and just painted to that. Um, but yeah, I recommend, not just to you but to anyone, revisit the Corellian trilogy if you get the chance. It might be better than you remember. It was really good. The only major criticism I'd have about that one is that it wraps up way too easily and quickly at the end, or it's just
Yeah.
kind of like there was like this whole cabal, that did this on, I think it was Socoria. It was some planet outside of the system, and it literally ended almost like a Scooby Doo episode where the villains just tied up and they're
Right,
unmasked.
right.
Like, oh, you did it on like the last like page. and just like that was it.
Well,
But
and it was kind of cool that Thrakenthal Solo and Centerpoint Station and all that stuff popped up again in the New
yes,
Jedi Order
yes,
series.
that's true. I am aware of this despite having not read it.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
so yeah, we've gone over a little bit on time on this episode because it turns out that the Bantam novels,
There's a lot of them.
there's a lot of them. Although what's even more prevalent is clearly our memories and dissections of them. So we kind of stretched it out a bit. But what we're gonna do is we'll have kind of a Bantam era memories part 2 on the next episode. And we'll cover the Callista trilogy, the Hand of Thrawn duology, and a few of the other Tales books. Maybe even some Young Jedi Knights. Maybe we'll go into that a little more. And then we'll do the Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina anniversary review a little later as well, probably the next episode. And yeah, so hope everyone enjoyed that, and we'll catch everybody on the next one. And remember, you can reach us on Facebook. We are at Star Wars Unfiltered at yahoo.com. We're on Instagram, and of course, check out the YouTube channel where we have our Jedi Knight Let's Plays and some other things, like the podcast episodes where you're probably hearing this right now.
Hopefully.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll catch you next episode. Take care.
Goodbye.